Hi guys, how's it going? We are here in the third video on the series of understanding UI using Figma. Over here, I have completed the first two videos on explaining what we are going to be achieving in Figma. And then the second video was about the basic interface and the community that is available. And that helps us to understand Figma slightly deeply. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about three specific things: groups, frames, and sections. So these are the three different things which are almost similar, but they have very specific use cases in Figma. Often misunderstood and miscommunicated, groups, frames, and sections have very own impeccable reasons for being there in the system. Today, let's discuss that and let's see a small demonstration of how these can be used for slightly better understanding. Okay, so let's get started. Now the first one is groups. You've probably used groups before in any of the other editing softwares, whether it's Canva if you're editing some photos, or it's Photoshop where you are working together on a graphic design. You know, groups are supposed to be just an organizational structure so that multiple things can be played around easily. And that's exactly what it is in Figma as well. Then we have frames. Frames are the visible components of the UI. These frames have slightly more advanced and nuanced features than the groups themselves, which basically means they have, actually I will just show that to you. But these frames are basically the ones which become visible in the final UI. Then we have sections. Sections are again an organizational feature. There's not a lot that you can do with sections, but there are some very nice use cases for sections as well. And we will see that again in the demonstration. Before we get started with all of the deep dive, let me quickly tell you something that I have been creating on the side. So we have been working on a certification course in UI and UX. Now this certification course in UX and UI will contain a lot of different things, from understanding user experience, learning about software such as Figma, and understanding why UI and design is necessary when you're creating products. This certification will also help you to get a foot in the door when you're applying for design positions. So why don't you head through the link in the description. Tell me what you think about that course and whether you're interested in it or not in the comments below. I will be waiting for your responses so that I can understand what more do you want from that course itself. By the way, coming back to the course, we have been working on something called Linkder, which is LinkedIn and Tinder mixed together, and that is what we will be achieving by the end of these 10 videos. So stay tuned and make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you can follow up on what are the next set of videos that I'm going to be creating. Well then, let's get started and understand these aspects of groups, frames, and sections. Well, now that I've talked about it, let's get into a quick demonstration to see how these work. So here I have about 7 screens. We have seen one of these screens before in one of the earlier videos. If you remember, every time that we pressed change on the button, the frame would change and eventually the color would change as well, right? And I've done something very similar with a slightly different design. Now instead of rectangles, we have ellipses over here. For ease of our use, I've also numbered them in 1, 2, 3. Now all of these are quite simple. Let me quickly show you the frame structure or the organization structure for this one. Now what we have over here is rectangle 1. That is a frame that we had created, and within that frame I've created a simple group. This group is 1 and rectangle 2, and that makes it easy for me to move around this entire lot easily. Then we have a home button. This home button is essentially used to move to a different screen, and this is consistent across all of the different screens that we do have over here. Now all of this button, home button, will redirect me to a home page or a start page. Now the start page has two options, a rectangle and an ellipse, and both of these are supposed to be guiding you to a particular structure or a particular section of that entire file. So okay, when I say section, don't get confused right now, because we'll talk about section and how these frames are used in a short while. So continuing, here is my rectangle, and you can see that how this is grouped. Similarly, we have another group over here and a third group over here, and then a button over here, just like these. Now these buttons are also groups, right? I just renamed it so that it's easy to maintain. You can see that there are those similar layers over here. Now, what is happening with each of these? There are no new additional properties that have been added to the text or the object that has been used. Fair? Okay, all good. Very similarly, let's move to ellipsis. Now in ellipsis, I have not grouped those the ellipsis and the numbers, and I've left them be okay because I was not expecting them to move around a lot. Well then, so we have something very similar. The home button redirects you to the home page for all of these, and then there is the change button that ends up moving to the previous or the next screen. All of this good. Perfect. Now, apart from these frames for rectangles and ellipses, I have also created a simple frame, this one, which is just two buttons, rectangle and ellipse, and it moves to a simple section. Now, let me show how a section is created. So, let's delete this. Okay, don't need to delete this directly. I just need to move all of these frames outside this particular section. So, once we have these frames over here, I can use Shift S, the shortcut, to get at the section tool. And once I have this tool, let me just drag a section inside like this, and you can see that how there are elements which are going to be considered inside the section are getting highlighted. So if I move it over here, ellipse 2, that frame is not going to be considered, and if I just drag it over here, it will get considered. Okay, well and good. So this is what it does to a section. Now the next thing is, this section is, I can rename it and call it something like this, like an ellipse or maybe ellipsis. Okay, great. Now within this section as well, I can choose to move the section very easily because there it's now somewhat grouped, right? But that's not the idea over here. Section works very similar to a group, but there are a couple of other properties over here. So the first thing is, within ellipsis, I do have certain options so that I can change the layout. This is something that's not available in a group, and maybe we can just move it around. I just want it to look somewhat structured, right? So this is what I have. We have a fill and a stroke that we can put across on this section altogether as well. But okay, those are very aesthetic ideas about what a section does. Is there something tangible that we can derive from it? Well, so this is what we do. Now, instead of moving from a rectangle to one of these frames, I can move to the section directly. So what I'm going to be doing is, if I do have the prototype layer on, the line has been drawn directly from the button to the section. Okay, we have a flow that has also been set up within these frames as well. So over here we have this frame, and on this rectangle we have this entire lot coming in. Right, so what would you expect? Once you have the rectangle button clicked, it will take you to these frames, and you can play around with these frames if necessary. Now similarly, let's do another one, because I removed this one for demonstration. Let's drag a line directly from the button onto the section. Pay attention that I'm doing this on the section and not on the frame internally. It is possible, but I want it over here. Okay, and on tap, navigate to ellipsis and instead. Okay, all of this is good. Maybe I can just change this to smart animate, and this one is smart animate as well. And with over here, I see all of the buttons directly move you to the first frame. Not too complicated, all of this seems easy. And now if I do preview this, I can see start off with over here, rectangle, change, change, change. 1, 2, 3, of course it goes in that order. If I press home, I end up coming back to this screen, and from ellipse, I can change, change, change. All of this is good. But the benefit of using a section as well is that Figma, or the prototype in Figma, remembers the state that was last maintained. What does that mean? So if I change in the ellipsis to, let's say, number 3, and then in the rectangles, let's move from number 1 to number 2. Okay, remember rectangle 2, ellipsis 3. Well, good. Now, once I've come back home, I can still go to ellipse and say that my state has been retained. What does that mean? It means that Figma, the prototype, remembers which was the last frame that I visited in that section. So it makes you lose out on that idea of using a different variable to maintain that state. It is rather easy to create frames and put it in a section rather than maintaining state through a different variable. Okay, so we have 3 over here. Do you remember what was rectangle? rectangle was number 2. And if I go home, click on rectangle, there it is, number 2. Right? So this is one of the benefits of using sections over here as well. Now, not just this, it is also great to organize my entire structure. So I can maintain all of these different rectangles and ellipses, all of the different frames that I'm going to be talking about in different areas. And not just that. Now let me do a quick preview of what I have been building for the LinkedIn site. Now over here, I do have this LinkedIn panel open. You can see that there is something called components over here. I did mention I'll create a new video about this to explain this in detail, because this is such a mind-blowing feature that it cannot be explained in 2 minutes. Well, getting back, then I do have something for a jobs flow and a company's flow. Now, of course, you probably might not be able to get an idea of what it is, but there are multiple screens which are just about companies over here in the companies flow section, and there is a flow of how things would move in the jobs section as well. So this is for different jobs. So I do have Director of Product Management, Engineering Manager, Sample Role, and Brand Monetization, Gift and Card Sales. So that is also what I have over here. A sign-in section, which will take me or will explain me how the sign-in will happen. It makes it easier to maintain a lot of content or group the content together without the hassle of giving any more computational load to Figma. Similarly, I have skills. Right now, skills is not developed a lot. Maybe we might be able to develop it in the future, but here it is as a simple section. And then for components, all of these components are basically something that has been used in the design. I will cover this in the upcoming video, but I hope at least for now you have been able to understand the difference between groups, frames and sections. So why don't you go ahead, try this over here and see if you can create a structure like this so that you have multiple frames, multiple sections and multiple groups, and tell me what you thought of it. If you were able to crack it, well and good. If you were not, probably just go back, rewind the video, see exactly what I was doing and replicate that. Once you have understood these, in the next video, we're going to be talking about auto layout, which is a crazy feature for frames. And we will see that in detail how auto layout can be used, what are the different constraints and what are the multiple things that you can play around with. So I will see you in that video. In the meantime, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel and share this with somebody who you think needs to learn Figma. I will see you in the next video.